Leonard Whitmore had spent his life building an empire. His name carried weight in boardrooms across the globe. His estate sat high on the cliffs of the Pacific, and his presence alone could command a room. He had wealth, power, and a stunning wife who turned heads at every gala they attended. To the world, Leonard and Celeste Whitmore were perfection, a couple that defined success. But beneath the surface, something had shifted, something he chose to ignore. Blinded by his own arrogance, he believed nothing could touch him. He had worked too hard, built too much. But in a single careless moment, he made a mistake, a fleeting embrace with the wrong woman. A mistake that would change everything. Because the woman he had overlooked, the wife he had taken for granted, was about to receive a proposal from a man even more powerful than him. And for the first time in his life, Leonard would realize that money couldn't fix what was broken. Leonard Whitmore was the kind of man people admired and envied in equal measure. Tall, sharp-eyed, and exuding quiet confidence, he carried himself like someone who had never heard the word no. His family's wealth stretched back generations. His grandfather had struck gold in Montana, turning a single lucky break into an empire spanning real estate, technology, and luxury investments. His father had expanded that fortune, and Leonard had taken it even further, securing his place as one of the most influential men of his time. His face often appeared on the cover of business magazines, always beside his wife, Celeste, a woman of effortless elegance and quiet strength. Together, they were an unstoppable force. But Celeste's journey had been different. She hadn't been born into privilege. Raised in a working-class neighborhood outside of Chicago, she had put herself through college, balancing scholarships with waitressing shifts. Meeting Leonard had felt like stepping into another world, a world of wealth, power, and dazzling possibilities. Their home reflected that world. Perched high above the Pacific Ocean, their estate was a masterpiece of architecture and wealth. Marble floors stretched beneath chandeliers imported from Paris. Towering windows opened onto perfectly manicured gardens, and rare orchids bloomed alongside koi ponds that shimmered under the California sun. It was a place designed for extravagant parties and whispered business deals. But when the last guests left and silence settled in, the illusion cracked. The grand bedroom, large enough to fit an entire apartment, felt colder with each passing night. The bed, draped in the finest Egyptian cotton, was too often half empty by morning. Leonard was always moving, always chasing the next deal, flying from one country to another without a second thought. And Celeste, she had learned to drink her morning coffee alone, staring at a table set for two. Once, there had been love between them. But love was fragile, and Leonard had been too distracted to see it slipping away. Now, someone else had noticed her. Someone who wasn't too busy. Someone who saw her. And Leonard Whitmore was about to realize that even kings can lose their queens. Text messages had replaced late-night conversations. The soft whispers that once filled their home had been drowned out by ringing phones and urgent business calls. Celeste felt the loneliness creeping in. She tried to fill the silence with purpose, throwing herself into charity work. Whenever she could, she volunteered at children's hospitals and organized high-profile fundraising events. She attended galas for the Whitmore Foundation and lent her name to causes that mattered. But no amount of philanthropy could quiet the ache inside her. To the world, Leonard and Celeste Whitmore were the definition of a perfect marriage. Paparazzi captured them smiling at black tie events, holding hands at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Society pages gushed about their generosity and praised Celeste's impeccable fashion sense, her shimmering gowns, her exquisite jewelry. Even their closest friends, like Bianca Lawson and Mark Reynolds, believed they were unshakable. And why wouldn't they? Leonard never failed to shower Celeste with extravagant gifts. A new luxury car for every anniversary. Spontaneous weekend getaways to Santorini or the Maldives, as if layering new memories over old wounds would make the distance between them disappear. Celeste played her role flawlessly. She was the gracious hostess, the devoted wife, the perfect companion. But deep down, something was missing. Some nights, as Leonard left with nothing more than a quick kiss on the cheek, she found herself wondering, is this what happiness looks like? And each time that doubt surfaced, she buried it. After all, they had built a life others could only dream of. Wealth, influence, admiration. What could possibly shake a foundation that strong? But cracks were forming, small, imperceptible at first. The warmth between them had cooled, replaced by polite smiles and carefully maintained appearances. From the outside, they looked like a couple deeply in love. But behind closed doors, the laughter had faded. The affection was slipping away. Neither of them dared to acknowledge it. Not yet. Not until something as small as an embrace, would shatter the fragile illusion. The world they had built so carefully was about to be tested in ways they never saw coming. The next morning, Celeste woke to an empty space beside her. Leonard had left before sunrise, off to another high-stakes business meeting. New York was buzzing with news. Tech mogul Daniel Wu was making major investments in the city, and Leonard, always in search of the next big deal, had wasted no time securing a breakfast meeting. With a quiet sigh, Celeste made her way to her walk-in closet. Rows of designer dresses, handbags, and heels greeted her, a testament to Leonard's generosity. She selected a soft mint green dress, elegant yet understated, perfect for her day ahead. Today, she would be at the Children's Hospital fundraiser, doing the one thing that still made her feel like herself. Downstairs, Maria, their longtime housekeeper, was already waiting with a fresh pot of jasmine tea. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," she said with a warm smile. "Will you and Mr. Whitmore be home for dinner tonight?" Celeste forced a polite smile. "I'm not sure, Maria. Leonard's schedule is packed. But let's prepare something light in case he comes home late." Maria nodded, concern flickering in her eyes. She had been with the Whitmores for years. She had watched the way their marriage had changed, the way Celeste paced through the quiet halls at night, waiting for a husband who was always somewhere else. She wasn't the only one who noticed the distance, but no one dared to say it out loud. Not yet. Maria had always been observant. She noticed the way Celeste wandered the hallways at night, the way her footsteps echoed in the vast, empty spaces of the mansion. And she noticed something else too, how often Leonard's side of the bed remained untouched, the sheets perfectly smooth, as if no one had slept there at all. But Maria was loyal. Whatever she saw, she kept to herself. That morning, Celeste arrived at the Children's Hospital just as the day's fundraising event was in full swing. Brightly colored balloons filled the lobby, and volunteers hurried about, setting up silent auctions and distributing pamphlets about pediatric research. Here she felt a sense of purpose. This was where she belonged, not in cold, empty rooms, but among people who smiled with sincerity, who were working toward something bigger than themselves. She moved through the crowd effortlessly, chatting with doctors, nurses, and fellow volunteers. Her presence lent a quiet elegance to the event, a touch of prestige. Between conversations, she reached for her phone, checking for messages from Leonard. Nothing. It wasn't unusual. A day without so much as a text had become the norm. Still, every time it happened, it chipped away at something inside her. "He's probably just busy," she told herself, slipping the phone back into her handbag. But the excuse didn't feel as convincing as it once had. A few hours later, Celeste met Bianca Lawson for lunch at a small cafe nearby. They had been friends since college. Bianca, sharp-witted and fiercely loyal, was the kind of person who would drive across the city at 3 a.m. if you needed her. Over steaming bowls of tomato soup, Bianca wasted no time getting to the point. "How are things at home, Cece?" Celeste hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around her spoon. "Fine," she said, keeping her voice even. "Busy as always. You know Leonard, always chasing the next big deal." Bianca didn't look convinced. "Look, I've known you two since the beginning," she said, her voice softer now. "You used to talk about everything, silly things, big dreams, inside jokes. Now, every time I see you, you're alone." She met Celeste's gaze. "If something's wrong, you can tell me." Celeste forced a small smile. "This is just how life evolves," she said carefully. "Leonard's business is growing, and I have my charity work. We're just in a different phase." Bianca leaned forward, not letting her off so easily. A different phase, or drifting apart. The words hit harder than Celeste expected. "I'm fine, B," she said finally, reaching across the table to squeeze her friend's hand. "Really?" She hesitated, then added, "But if things ever get overwhelming, you'll be the first to know. Promise." They parted with a hug, and for a moment, Celeste felt lighter. Bianca was always a voice of reason, a grounding presence, but as she walked back to her car, the feeling faded. No matter what she told herself, she couldn't shake the truth. She had never felt more alone. That night, Leonard didn't come home until nearly midnight. Celeste was waiting in the living room, a magazine resting in her lap, though she had barely turned a page. The grand chandelier above cast a warm glow, illuminating the room in soft golden light. When the front door finally opened, she looked up to see him standing there, looking more exhausted than usual. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his tie was loosened, and his suit jacket hung over his arm. "You're still up?" he murmured, rubbing his forehead. "I'm sorry. The meeting with Daniel Wu ran late, and then I had to meet with some investors from Europe." Celeste gave him a small, understanding smile. "I saved dinner for you," she said gently. "I can heat it up if you're hungry." Leonard shook his head, collapsing onto the couch. "Thanks, but I grabbed something on the way," he exhaled, leaning back. "I appreciate the thought." For the first time in a long time, he really looked at her, at the way her soft robe draped around her shoulders, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked effortlessly beautiful in the quiet glow of the chandelier, and for a brief moment something stirred inside him. A memory of the past, of the nights he used to rush home just to share a simple meal with her. But just as quickly, the feeling faded. He glanced away, reaching for his phone. "I just need to finish some notes before bed," he muttered. Celeste nodded. "All right," she said softly, rising from her chair. "Good night." As she walked upstairs, that familiar ache settled in her chest once more. The one she still couldn't quite name. Something in Leonard's voice, in the way his gaze barely met hers, pulled at Celeste's heart. She wanted to reach for him, to remind him that they weren't just two people coexisting under the same roof. They were partners, lovers. But the space between them no longer felt like something that could be bridged with a single step. So she walked away. Leonard watched her retreat, a flicker of guilt twisting inside him. He told himself he was doing this for their future, for the legacy of the Whitmore name. But as he scrolled through his messages, a quiet, unwelcome thought surfaced. What if, in chasing success, I lose the one person who matters most? A month later, Leonard found himself at a high-profile gala in downtown Manhattan. The event, held in the opulent ballroom of the Regal Grand Hotel, was a fundraiser for international children's education initiatives. Leonard had been invited as a keynote speaker, set to discuss the role of philanthropy in modern business. Celeste had planned to accompany him, but that morning she had flown to Chicago. Her sister had called, needing her support, and family came first. So he was here alone, moving through a sea of dignitaries, CEOs, and socialites. He exchanged handshakes with some of the world's most influential figures, including media moguls and tech billionaires. The ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and gilded accents, was the perfect setting for power and wealth to mingle under the guise of generosity. During a break between speeches, Leonard stepped onto the mezzanine, hoping for a quiet moment to go over his notes. That was when he saw her. Vanessa Moreau. Seated at a small, elegantly decorated table, she twirled the stem of her champagne flute between her fingers with effortless grace. Her long, jet-black hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her emerald-green eyes sparkled under the dim light. There was something about her posture, composed yet commanding, that made it clear she belonged in circles like these. She was deep in conversation with a man Leonard recognized as a renowned publisher. When the man excused himself, Vanessa's gaze swept across the room and landed on Leonard. She smiled, subtle, knowing, and gestured for him to come over. Never one to turn down an introduction, Leonard approached. "Leonard Whitmore," he said, extending a hand. "I don't believe we've met." Vanessa accepted his handshake with practiced ease. "Vanessa Moreau," she replied smoothly. "A pleasure. I hear your speech is one of the highlights of the evening." Leonard gave a polite chuckle. "I hope I don't disappoint." He tilted his head slightly. "And you? Are you here representing one of the charities?" Vanessa leaned in slightly, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. "I'm on the board of an international relief organization," she explained. "We provide scholarships for girls in developing countries. This gala is an important fundraiser for us." A small, knowing smile crossed her lips. "But let's be honest, these events are as much about networking as they are about philanthropy, aren't they?" Leonard nodded, intrigued. "Sometimes, yes," he admitted. Though I'd like to think we still do real good, despite all the glitz and glamour. Vanessa lifted a shoulder in an elegant shrug. Of course, she said, studying him. But practicality and influence often go hand in hand. Her gaze lingered for a second longer than necessary. I'm familiar with the Whitmore legacy, she continued. Your family has quite the reputation for philanthropy. Leonard felt a swell of pride. We do what we can, he said. My wife, Celeste, is actually more involved than I am when it comes to hospital fundraisers. She's usually by my side at events like this, but she had to fly out this morning for a family emergency. Vanessa's expression softened. I hope everything is all right, she said smoothly. It's wonderful that your wife. It's rare to find a spouse so involved in philanthropy, Vanessa remarked, her voice smooth yet deliberate. Not everyone takes such an active role. There was nothing overtly suggestive in her tone, yet Leonard couldn't ignore the quiet intensity beneath her words. There was a confidence about her, one that both intrigued and unsettled him. For the next half hour, they exchanged stories. Vanessa spoke of her travels to refugee camps in conflict zones, her voice carrying the weight of real experience. Leonard, in turn, shared Celeste's hospital initiatives and his father's lifelong vision for a more equitable world. Then, an announcement called him to the stage. Leonard delivered his speech with ease, weaving personal anecdotes into a broader message about philanthropy. The room erupted in applause, and as he stepped away from the podium, he felt the familiar weight of admiration. Several women glanced his way, their interest evident. But it was Vanessa's lingering gaze that held his attention. She approached him near the buffet, a fresh champagne flute in hand. You speak with conviction, she said, studying him thoughtfully. It's refreshing. Too often, these events feel like vanity projects rather than real change. Leonard chuckled, lifting his own glass. I was taught that philanthropy should be personal, he replied. But I'd love to hear more about your work. He glanced at his watch. If you're not in a rush, perhaps I could walk you out? Vanessa arched a perfectly shaped brow but nodded. I'd like that. They strolled through the hotel's grand corridors, their footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors, weaving through murmured conversations and distant laughter. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city alive with neon reflections shimmering on the wet pavement. A sleek limousine idled at the curb, waiting for Leonard. A black town car stood ready for Vanessa. Before stepping away, she reached into her clutch and handed him a card. Vanessa Moreau, Global Outreach Director, Moreau Foundation, she said, her voice soft yet certain. Contact me anytime. I suspect we could create something meaningful together. The city lights cast a glow on her poised smile. Leonard slipped the card into his pocket, feeling a flicker of excitement, one that wasn't entirely professional. But he pushed the thought aside. He was a married man. Still, as the limousine carried him home, his mind replayed their conversation, and the quiet thrill of her presence lingered longer than it should have. 2 days later, an email arrived. Vanessa had written, suggesting they meet for lunch to explore potential collaborations. Leonard agreed. After all, what harm was there in a professional meeting, especially if it served a charitable cause? And yet, as he typed his response, setting a time at an upscale midtown restaurant, a question lingered at the back of his mind. Was it the excitement of a new philanthropic venture, or was it something else entirely? That night, when Leonard returned home, he found Celeste already asleep, having just returned from Chicago. He stood by the bed for a moment, watching her peaceful expression, her breathing slow and steady. He bent down, pressing a light kiss to her forehead. She barely stirred. As he straightened, a quiet voice inside him whispered, "You've done nothing wrong." He was simply expanding his philanthropic horizons. And yet, deep down, he knew. A line had been drawn. And once crossed, there would be no turning back. 3 weeks later, Leonard sat at an exclusive midtown bistro, absent-mindedly scanning the lunch menu. He adjusted his cufflinks and checked his phone, half expecting a message from Celeste. She used to check in around noon, little messages about his day, casual words of affection. But lately their communication had dwindled to practicalities, household matters, social engagements, logistics. Something had shifted. Then, the rhythmic click of heels against polished marble pulled his attention. Vanessa had arrived. Heads turned as she made her way to his table, draped in a tailored navy dress with subtle gold accents. She moved with effortless confidence, understated but impossible to ignore. Leonard rose to greet her, and somewhere, in the back of his mind, that quiet voice whispered again. Leonard stood to greet her, offering a polite handshake, one that somehow felt more familiar than it should have. Punctuality, Vanessa remarked with a knowing smile. Always a good sign. They took their seats, and she wasted no time getting to the point. With effortless command, Vanessa outlined the Morrow Foundation's latest initiatives: education grants for underprivileged children in Southeast Asia, healthcare projects in rural Africa, disaster relief programs in Central America. She spoke with clarity, breaking down budgets, logistical hurdles, and long-term impact. Leonard listened, impressed. She wasn't just a figurehead. She knew the details. She understood the challenges. As the waiter took their orders, Vanessa leaned in slightly. "I've seen the Whitmore name attached to many philanthropic ventures," she said, studying him. "But I'm curious, do you have a personal cause? One that truly drives you?" Leonard hesitated for a moment, caught off guard. He thought of Celeste and the way she poured herself into children's hospitals, how deeply she cared for the community. "My wife is particularly passionate about pediatric healthcare," he said, swirling the ice in his glass. "I tend to focus more on funding medical research institutes. It's a bit broader, I suppose, but I want to foster real innovation." Vanessa nodded, her green eyes sharp with curiosity. "Innovation is crucial," she agreed. "But so is personal connection. Sometimes when philanthropy becomes too big, it loses that human touch." Her words struck a chord. It was a sentiment Leonard himself had expressed at the gala. He was surprised by how carefully Vanessa had listened. Their conversation wove seamlessly between philosophy and strategy. Leonard found himself relaxing, enjoying the exchange in a way he rarely did with new acquaintances. Before their main course arrived, Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a neatly organized folder. "I took the liberty of putting together some potential collaborations," she said, sliding it toward him. "Your foundation could partner with ours, or we could launch a joint initiative. Imagine the impact if we combined resources." Leonard flipped through the documents, genuinely impressed. "This is thorough," he admitted. "I'll need to run it by my board, but I see a lot of potential here." Vanessa's lips curved in satisfaction. "I had a feeling you'd be open to it," she said. "Your track record suggested as much." There it was again, that quiet confidence. A presence that was both compelling and unsettling. Leonard reminded himself that this was strictly business, but he couldn't ignore the thought that flickered, uninvited, across his mind. What if I spent more time with someone like her? Someone driven, passionate, electric. Then, just as quickly, guilt pressed in. "You're married, Leonard. Remember your vows, your history, your wife." Determined to stay professional, he refocused on the proposal in front of him. After the meal, they lingered over coffee. The conversation drifted from philanthropy to personal anecdotes, light-hearted jokes about life in high society, stories of travel. Vanessa recounted a near-disastrous hurricane relief mission. Leonard spoke of his father's philosophies on giving. They laughed at the realization that they had both attended the same global conference in London years ago, though their paths had never crossed back then. Eventually, Leonard checked his watch. "I hate to cut this short," he said, setting down his cup. "But I have a meeting across town in half an hour." Vanessa placed her coffee down smoothly. "Of course," she said. "Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the collaboration." They stood and made their way outside. The sun was bright, and New York's chaotic rhythm pulsed around them. Taxis whizzed by, pedestrians rushed in every direction, conversations rose and fell in a steady hum. For a moment, they stood together at the curb, the city moving in a blur around them. Neither spoke. And then, the moment passed. Vanessa extended her hand, her expression warm yet unreadable. "I'm glad we had the chance to talk in depth," she said. "Let's not make this the last." Leonard nodded, tucking her proposal folder under his arm. "We'll be in touch soon. Thanks for meeting on such short notice." Her eyes flickered with something close to warmth, or perhaps understanding. "Anytime." He hailed a cab, sliding into the back seat and giving the driver an Upper East Side address. As the car pulled away, he caught one last glimpse of Vanessa standing on the sidewalk, poised, confident, effortlessly captivating against the city's blur of lights and motion. A faint unease settled over him. He felt as if he were standing at the edge of something dangerous, staring down a precipice. But he hadn't stepped over it. Not yet. It's just business, he told himself. But the quiet voice inside him whispered otherwise. 3 blocks later, his phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. "Hey, how's your day going? Thinking of you." Leonard stared at the screen, warmth and guilt crashing over him in equal measure. After a pause, he typed back a quick response, short, almost formal. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he powered off his phone. He needed time to think, to convince himself that this was only about philanthropy. But deep down, he knew, this wasn't just about business anymore. And that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. In the weeks that followed, Leonard poured himself into the potential collaboration with Vanessa's foundation. Emails flew back and forth at all hours, filled with meticulously crafted proposals, budget outlines, and strategic plans. Conference calls began formally but often ended with a few moments of easy, playful banter. Late-night phone calls became routine. He justified them as necessary. After all, coordinating across time zones required flexibility. But Celeste noticed the subtle changes. The way his phone never left his side at dinner. The quiet, almost instinctive way he'd lower his voice when she entered his home office. The slight tension in his posture whenever she asked about his day. She told herself it was nothing. Leonard had always been ambitious. He had thrown himself into countless projects before. But this time felt different. As if an invisible wall had risen between them. One evening, Celeste decided to bring them back to what once was. She spent the afternoon preparing his favorite meal, braised short ribs with roasted vegetables. A rich chocolate mousse for dessert, because she still remembered the way he used to grin like a child whenever she made it. She set the table with fine china, lit soft-scented candles, arranging everything with quiet hope. When she heard the jingle of keys in the foyer, she smoothed down her dress and hurried to greet him. Leonard stepped inside, his tie slightly loosened, his briefcase hitting the floor with a dull thud. He looked up, startled by the sight of the elegantly set table. "Hey," he said, his voice edged with surprise. "What's all this?" Celeste offered a gentle smile. "I thought we could have a quiet dinner together," she said. "It's been a while since we had a proper meal at home, just the two of us." For a moment, something in his expression softened. He stepped forward and pressed a quick kiss to her cheek. "That's thoughtful," he murmured. Then, almost as an afterthought, "I'm sorry I'm so late. I had to finalize some details with the Moreau Foundation. There's a deadline for a pilot program launch in Southeast Asia." Celeste nodded, ushering him toward the table, though she couldn't ignore the flicker of restlessness in his eyes. "You must be exhausted," she said, pulling out his chair. "Let's eat." They sat, and for a little while, everything felt normal. Leonard complimented the meal. Celeste filled him in on her latest hospital fundraiser. They talked about upcoming charity events, about renovations in the guest wing of the estate. But the deeper their conversation went, the more she felt it. The distance between them. A silence that spoke louder than words. As the evening stretched on, Celeste couldn't shake the feeling that Leonard wasn't really there. His body sat across from her, his hands moved, his voice filled the air. But his mind was elsewhere. Then, his phone vibrated. She watched as he glanced at the screen, and for the briefest moment, his lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Her chest tightened. "Another business matter?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Leonard slipped the phone back into his pocket with practiced ease. "Yes, sorry, just some urgent details about tomorrow's strategy call." Celeste nodded, but the unease in her stomach only deepened. She tried to focus on the meal, on the warmth of the candlelight, on the idea that this dinner was meant to bring them closer. But the tension between them was undeniable. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak. "Leonard, are we okay?" He hesitated, just for a second. "Of course," he said, setting down his fork. "Why do you ask?" She exhaled slowly. "It just feels like we haven't been connecting lately. You've been distant, preoccupied. I can't help but notice." Leonard sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm juggling a lot right now," he admitted. "This collaboration, if it succeeds, it could redefine what the Whitmore Foundation does on a global scale." Celeste wanted to ask, with whom? And why the secrecy? But she held back. She didn't want to sound accusatory. Instead, she reached across the table, taking his hand. I understand, she said softly. But I miss you. I really miss you. Sometimes it feels like I'm living with a ghost. Leonard squeezed her hand, but his eyes flickered. Guilt, uncertainty, something unspoken. I'm sorry, Cease, he murmured. I'll try to make more time for us. Let's plan a weekend away. Just the two of us. She forced a smile and nodded. But deep inside, she knew. A weekend away wouldn't fix what was broken. They returned to their meal, filling the silence with small talk. But beneath it all, the unspoken truth loomed, thick as fog. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Leonard's phone buzzed again. He grabbed it quickly, excusing himself to the hallway. Celeste lay still, watching his shadow move beyond the doorway, hearing the low murmur of his voice. A sinking feeling took hold of her. When he finally returned, he slipped beneath the covers, pressing a brief kiss to her lips. She kissed him back, but all she could taste was the distance between them. He pulled her close, but his mind was 1,000 miles away. That night, she barely slept. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, words spoken long ago, in a different time, when love had seemed simpler. Don't let silence grow in your marriage, Celeste. Speak up, even if the truth is hard to hear. But Celeste hesitated, because deep down, she wasn't sure she was ready for the truth. Especially if it involved another woman. So she said nothing. And in that silence, the quiet fracture between them deepened, stretching wider and wider until it threatened to break everything apart. The following weekend, Celeste packed a bag and drove upstate to visit her mother. As she pulled into the quiet, suburban neighborhood where she had grown up, a wave of nostalgia washed over her. The streets were lined with familiar trees, the houses unchanged, the sky a soft gray that made everything feel a little slower, a little softer. When she stepped inside her childhood home, the warmth of it wrapped around her instantly. Her mother, Nancy, greeted her with a tight, familiar hug, the kind that made Celeste feel small again, in the best possible way. "How are you, sweetheart?" Nancy asked, leading her into the cozy living room, where the scent of freshly baked cookies lingered in the air. Celeste sank into an overstuffed armchair, glancing around at the framed photos lining the mantel. Pictures of her as a child, beaming on a swing set. Her late father standing behind her, his smile proud and kind. Life had been simpler then. "I'm managing," Celeste said finally, though the words felt hollow. Nancy handed her a plate of cookies and a warm cup of chamomile tea. She studied her daughter carefully. "Tell me what's going on, sweetheart," she said gently. "I can see it in your face. Something's weighing on you." Celeste stared into the rising steam of her tea, considering brushing off the concern with a vague excuse about stress. But the weight in her chest was too heavy to ignore. She took a shaky breath. "Mom, I think Leonard and I are drifting apart." Her voice trembled slightly. Then, for the first time in weeks, she let the words spill out. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the feeling of something slipping away, piece by piece. Nancy listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't press. She just listened. And for the first time in a long time, Celeste felt like someone truly saw her. Nancy's gentle eyes flickered with concern as Celeste finished speaking. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, her mother spoke. "Marriage is hard, sweetheart," she said softly. "People grow, they change, and sometimes you have to fight to hold on to each other." She hesitated before adding, "But do you have any reason to believe he's seeing someone else?" Celeste's breath caught. She reached for a cookie, breaking it apart between trembling fingers. "I don't have proof," she admitted, "but I can't shake this feeling. He's always on his phone, always texting, and when I walk into the room, he changes. He gets guarded." Nancy reached across the table and took her daughter's hand, squeezing it firmly. "You need to talk to him, Celeste. Really talk. Let him know you won't accept half-truths. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect." Celeste blinked back tears. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of what I might find out, and I'm scared of losing him." Nancy's voice remained steady. "I know. But living in uncertainty can be worse than facing the truth." She gave Celeste's hand another squeeze. "You have a life to live, my love. Don't let fear keep you from it." Her mother's words settled deep within her, pressing against the doubts she had let grow for far too long. She had been waiting, hoping the problem would fix itself. But maybe it was time to stop waiting. Maybe it was time to confront Leonard, to fight for their marriage, or to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, Celeste returned to Westchester with a newfound determination. But as fate would have it, Leonard wasn't there. Another business trip, this time Chicago, an investors' summit. Determined not to let her resolve slip away in the silence of their home, she threw herself into her own work. She poured hours into planning her children's hospital fundraiser, meeting with potential donors, finalizing details for the upcoming charity banquet. She even joined a local yoga class, hoping to find some emotional and mental balance. Then, one afternoon, her phone rang. "Bianca, I'm in town for a few days," her friend said. "Drinks tonight?" Celeste hesitated. Lately, she had been so consumed by her own world, the long, lonely nights, the empty spaces in her marriage, that the idea of a night out felt foreign. But then she thought of her mother's words. "Reconnect with the people who love you." She took a deep breath. "Why not?" she said. That evening, Celeste met Bianca at a sleek Manhattan lounge, the kind of place that shimmered with gold accents and quiet luxury. The hum of low conversation filled the air, mingling with the clink of cocktail glasses. As soon as Bianca saw her, she pulled her into a tight hug. "You look exhausted," she said, studying Celeste with concern. Celeste gave a small shrug. "I've been dealing with a lot." They ordered drinks and slipped into a secluded corner booth. Under the soft glow of overhead lights, Celeste let it all spill out. The unease, the distance, the quiet fears gnawing at her heart. Bianca listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, asking a few thoughtful questions. Then she leaned forward. "Has he ever mentioned anyone in particular?" she asked. "Someone he's spending too much time with?" Celeste bit her lip, staring into her half-empty glass. "He's been talking a lot about someone named Vanessa Moreau," she admitted. "She's involved in a philanthropic collaboration with his foundation. I've never met her, but he's very invested in this partnership." Bianca's expression darkened. "Have you looked her up?" she asked. "See who she is, what she does? A quick search can tell you a lot." Celeste felt a flicker of guilt at the idea of spying on Leonard's associates. But Bianca's logic made sense. Knowledge was power. "I might," Celeste said slowly, "but I feel like Leonard should be the one to tell me what's going on." Bianca reached across the table, placing a steady hand over hers. "You deserve the truth," she said gently. "And if he won't give it to you freely, sometimes you have to seek it." A storm of emotions swirled inside Celeste. Anger, doubt, a deep longing for the husband she once knew. She reached for her glass, drained the last of her cocktail, and exhaled. I'll figure it out," Celeste said, her voice carrying a mixture of determination and fear. "One way or another." Bianca squeezed her hand. "I'm here for you, no matter what." They parted with a lingering embrace, a silent promise of support. On the drive home, Celeste felt something shift inside her. A new voice echoed in her mind, one that demanded answers. If Leonard was faithful, she would stand by him. She would fight for their marriage, for the bond they had built. But if he had strayed? She shook off the thought, unwilling to finish it. And yet, beneath the sadness, something else burned, a quiet ember of anger. She was Celeste Whitmore, strong, resilient, a woman who had given her heart and soul to this marriage. If Leonard had betrayed her, she wouldn't crumble. She would face the storm head-on. Later that week, Celeste attended a high-profile charity auction at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Stepping into the grand marble foyer alone, a tinge of anxiety crept in. For years, she had attended events like this by Leonard's side, exchanging pleasantries with fellow philanthropists, standing together as a polished, united front. But tonight, she was here on her own, and she would hold her head high. The auction showcased rare artifacts from around the world, with proceeds benefiting global education initiatives, a cause close to Celeste's heart. Dressed in an elegant black gown that hugged her silhouette just enough to exude confidence, she moved through the crowd with practiced grace. Familiar faces greeted her, polite smiles exchanged, but a part of her was distracted. She half expected to see Leonard. After all, these were the kinds of events he never missed, but he was nowhere to be found. Midway through the evening, while admiring a Renaissance painting, a voice spoke behind her. "Stunning, isn't it?" She turned. A tall, poised man stood before her, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. His features were striking: sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, and a quiet confidence that suggested he wasn't just another guest. He extended a hand. "Lawrence Chen." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "I've heard of you," she admitted. "Your tech investments, your global ventures." She shook his hand, noting the firm yet warm grip. "I'm Celeste Whitmore." Recognition flickered in his gaze. "Whitmore," he mused. "As in Leonard Whitmore's wife?" She inclined her head slightly. "That's right." Lawrence smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. It wasn't the rehearsed politeness she so often encountered in these circles. "I've met your husband a few times in business settings," he said. "He's a sharp negotiator, but I don't believe we've ever crossed paths before." Celeste returned the smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. What brings you here tonight?" He gestured toward the painting. "A breathtaking piece," he said. "I've always been drawn to art that tells stories of human resilience. This one speaks volumes about perseverance in the face of adversity." Then, shifting his focus back to her, he added, "And of course, I'm here for the education initiatives. In a world so driven by technology, I believe education is the key to a more balanced future. We can't afford to lose sight of that." Something about the sincerity in his voice, the steady intensity in his gaze, put Celeste at ease. As they continued talking, the conversation unfolded effortlessly. From the importance of early childhood education to the complexities of global philanthropy to the role of responsible leadership in corporate spaces. Unlike so many men she had met in these circles, Lawrence wasn't just making conversation. He was engaged. He listened. He asked thoughtful questions, challenged ideas, offered fresh perspectives. Without realizing it, they had drifted toward a quieter corner of the room, their discussion pulling them away from the buzzing crowd. And for the first time in a long time, Celeste felt something she hadn't expected. Not attraction, not intrigue, but the simple, refreshing feeling of being seen. Near the museum's statue gallery, Celeste and Lawrence continued their conversation over glasses of champagne. They discussed how technology was transforming healthcare, how philanthropy needed to evolve in a digital age. Celeste felt something she hadn't in a long time, a spark of excitement, of engagement. It dawned on her then how starved she was for real, meaningful conversation, for an intellectual and emotional connection beyond polite formalities and surface-level exchanges. Lawrence must have noticed her slight hesitation, because his tone softened. "I hope you don't mind me asking," he said gently, "but is Leonard here tonight?" Celeste's posture stiffened slightly. "He was invited," she replied, keeping her voice even, "but he had business commitments." Lawrence nodded, seemingly attuned to the unspoken weight in her words. "Such is the life of busy executives," he remarked. "I respect Leonard's business acumen. He's been spearheading some remarkable initiatives lately." Celeste thought of Vanessa Moreau, of the hushed phone calls, the messages he never explained. Her heart clenched. "Yes," she said, her voice measured. "I've heard about those. I'm still learning the details." Lawrence held her gaze for a beat before offering a kind smile. "Sometimes, in the rush to expand, we forget the people who've been there for us all along," he said. "I hope that's not happening to you." His words unraveled something inside her. For a fleeting moment, Celeste felt seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. It was both comforting and unsettling. Their conversation continued until the auction began. When the time came to bid, Celeste found herself seated beside Lawrence. He won a rare Asian scroll painting, his generous donation earning appreciative applause from the audience. And yet, despite the formal setting, Celeste couldn't ignore the subtle glances he sent her way. A quiet check-in, nothing obvious, but somehow more personal than it should have been. At the end of the night, as guests drifted toward the exit, Lawrence walked her to her car. Outside, the city shimmered with light, a crisp breeze rustling the trees of Central Park across the street. They paused near the curb, both reluctant to end the night. "It was a pleasure talking to you tonight," Lawrence said, his voice low and sincere. "You have a true heart for philanthropy. It's refreshing, in a world where so many give just for recognition." Celeste wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Likewise," she replied, meaning it. "You seem to have a real passion for making a difference." Lawrence hesitated, as if weighing his next words. Then, in a voice gentler than before, he said, "I hope this isn't the last time we talk. If you ever want to discuss philanthropic ideas, or if you simply need a friend, you can reach out." He handed her a business card, the elegant lettering embossed with his name and the logo of his multinational firm. Celeste accepted it, her fingers grazing the smooth paper. "Thank you," she said, her heartbeat inexplicably unsteady. "I appreciate that." As her car pulled up, a pang of reluctance settled in her chest. She hadn't expected to connect with anyone tonight, certainly not with a man as successful and respected as Lawrence Chen. And yet, as she slipped into the back seat and the city blurred past her window, she turned the card over between her fingers, replaying their conversation in her mind. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was something deeper. A reminder that she was still someone, still capable of forming real connections. Little did she know how profoundly this meeting would alter the course of her life, or how it would shake the already fragile foundation of her marriage. Because when Leonard Whitmore discovered the bond forming between his wife and the enigmatic Lawrence Chen, he wouldn't be the only one keeping secrets. Meanwhile, across the city, another story was unfolding. Because Vanessa Moreau's intentions were far from purely philanthropic. Born into modest beginnings in Buenos Aires, she had learned early that beauty, intelligence, and ambition could open doors, and she had no intention of stopping now. Vanessa Moreau had spent years perfecting the art of influence. She hadn't built the Moreau Foundation purely out of altruism. It was strategy, a masterful blend of power and opportunity. Charity opened doors that wealth alone could not. Over time, she had navigated the upper echelons of society, forging alliances that elevated her presence in both corporate and philanthropic circles. When she first met Leonard Whitmore at the gala, she sensed something beneath his polished exterior. He was powerful, respected, yet vulnerable. The cracks were subtle, but there, and Vanessa knew exactly how to slip through them. As their professional relationship deepened, she tested the limits. She sent late-night messages, carefully phrased to demand his urgent attention. She praised his dedication, his vision, in ways that fed his ego. Piece by piece, she dismantled his guard. In her sleek penthouse overlooking Central Park, Vanessa reveled in her growing hold over him. Yes, the Moreau Foundation benefited from Whitmore Foundation funds, but this was more than business. She thrived on control. She had done her research. Leonard's wife, Celeste, was deeply respected in philanthropic circles, but whispers suggested their marriage was not as solid as it seemed. Vanessa intended to exploit every fracture. One evening, Vanessa hosted a private cocktail gathering, a small celebration for the pilot program's launch. It was an intimate event at an exclusive rooftop bar, limited to a handful of high-profile donors and close associates. She extended a last-minute invitation to Leonard, fully aware that Celeste had asked him to come home early for dinner. He hesitated, but the pull of finalizing key details and the unspoken undertones of Vanessa's invitation proved too strong. The city stretched beneath them, glittering like fallen stars. Vanessa greeted Leonard with a warm smile, guiding him toward a secluded table. Despite the few guests mingling nearby, the setting felt intimate. As they raised their glasses in a quiet toast to the program's success, she leaned in slightly, her perfume wrapping around him. "I'm truly grateful for your support, Leonard," she murmured. "This program wouldn't exist without you." He cleared his throat. "It's a joint effort," he said. "You've done most of the groundwork." Vanessa's emerald eyes sparkled. "Don't underestimate the weight of your name," she said. "Your endorsement opens doors I could never access alone." She smiled, slow and deliberate. "We make a perfect team." Their conversation flowed with an easy rhythm, laughter, shared ambition, admiration. And then, after a particularly spirited discussion about future projects, Vanessa placed her hand lightly on his arm. "We've been working so hard," she said, her voice softer now. "It's nice to pause and appreciate the moment, isn't it?" Leonard felt the warmth of her touch, the electricity in the air between them. For a fleeting second, Celeste's face flickered through his mind. Her gentle smile, the way she always made his favorite meals, her unwavering kindness. But the moment dissolved as quickly as it came. Guilt tangled with something else, something darker. Something he wasn't ready to name. At the end of the evening, Vanessa walked Leonard to the elevator. Before he could step inside, she reached for his hand, giving it a light squeeze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I hope this is just the beginning of many successes together." His throat tightened. "Yes," he managed. "I appreciate everything you've done." She leaned in slightly, her breath warm against his ear. "Until next time." The elevator doors slid shut, and Leonard found himself alone. A rush of conflicting emotions surged through him. Excitement, shame, confusion. He knew something dangerous was unfolding. Every rational thought told him to pull away, to refocus on his marriage, to walk away from this temptation before it was too late. But the magnetic pull of Vanessa Moreau was undeniable, and deep down he wasn't sure he wanted to resist. Meanwhile, Vanessa Moreau returned to the rooftop lounge, her eyes sweeping across the glittering city skyline. She was close. If she could fully ensnare Leonard Whitmore, she wouldn't just secure financial backing. She would gain the prestige of being tied to one of New York's most influential families. The risk was undeniable. If Celeste Whitmore discovered their entanglement, the fallout would be explosive. But Vanessa had never been one to shy away from scandal. "Jonathan Montgomery wasn't the first powerful man I've charmed," she mused, sipping the last of her champagne. "But he may be the most useful." She would tighten her grip, slowly enough not to spook him. And if Celeste became an obstacle, Vanessa knew exactly how to handle meddling wives. She had done it before, positioning herself as the misunderstood, passionate partner while making the wife seem distant, ungrateful, or unworthy of the successful man at her side. But this time, it wouldn't be so simple. Celeste Whitmore was no naive socialite. She was respected, connected, a fixture in high society philanthropy. That complicated things. Still, Vanessa wasn't deterred. She had built her empire through patience, strategy, and calculated charm, and she wasn't about to stop now. In the days that followed, Vanessa sent Leonard carefully crafted messages. She referenced their rooftop celebration, subtly reminding him of the warmth between them. Nothing overt, nothing incriminating, but the undertone was unmistakable. Leonard's responses remained measured, polite, restrained. He wasn't fully surrendering yet, and that only fueled Vanessa's determination further. What she didn't know was that fate was already shifting the pieces on the board, because Celeste Whitmore wasn't as alone as Vanessa believed. Another powerful man had entered her life, Lawrence Chen. And when a man like Lawrence set his sights on someone truly worthy, even Vanessa Moreau might find herself overshadowed. Leonard Whitmore stood in his home office, staring at his reflection in the window. It was nearly midnight. Beyond the glass, the estate's manicured gardens lay bathed in moonlight, the world outside calm and untouched. But inside, his mind was anything but still. Celeste had gone to bed hours ago. A glass of bourbon sat half-finished on his desk, and he was alone. He had crossed lines he once believed were inviolable. What had started as professional meetings, casual collaborations, had morphed into something else. Phone calls turned into late-night dinners. Dinners turned into hushed conversations that lingered past the bounds of propriety. And now he stood at the edge of something he wasn't sure he could walk away from. His phone buzzed. Another message from Vanessa. He hesitated, self-loathing rising in his chest. He wanted to ignore it, to throw the phone across the room, to claw his way back to the life he had before this all spiraled out of control. But temptation had its own gravity. And so, instead of resisting, he reached for the screen. "Busy day tomorrow. Just wanted to say good night and sweet dreams, Leonard." His pulse quickened. He shoved the phone away, his heart hammering. Was this really the life he wanted? Secret texts, stolen moments, the constant fear of discovery. For all his wealth and power, he felt powerless over his own desires. His mind drifted back to Celeste, the woman he had once promised forever. They had shared dreams once, hadn't they? A vision of building something meaningful together, not just in business, but in family, in love. Where had that hopeful young man gone, and could he ever find his way back? The following afternoon, Leonard arrived at a charity symposium at the Waldorf Astoria. As he navigated the grand corridors, nodding to familiar faces, something or someone made him stop. Across the room, Celeste stood in quiet elegance, dressed in a navy blue gown. And she wasn't alone. Lawrence Chen stood beside her, talking, laughing, engaged in a conversation that seemed effortless. Leonard's chest tightened, a flicker of something sharp and unexpected twisting inside him. It wasn't jealousy, not yet, but it was something close. And before the night was over, he would realize the ground beneath his marriage wasn't just cracking, it was shifting. And for the first time, Leonard wasn't sure if he was the one in control anymore. Celeste stood across the room, wrapped in quiet elegance. The deep navy gown she wore complemented her poise, her effortless grace. But as she laughed and spoke with a small group of guests, Leonard noticed something he hadn't allowed himself to see before. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and in that moment, a jolt of realization struck him. He had been absent from her world for far too long. Summoning courage, he approached. When the conversation around her lulled, he spoke softly. "Celeste, can we talk?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. A pause. Then finally, "Of course." They stepped away from the crowded ballroom, finding a quiet alcove near a towering potted palm. Leonard studied her face, taking in the faint lines of stress around her eyes. "I've missed you," he admitted. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest. "That's odd," she said. "You've been busy, hardly home at all." Her words stung, but he knew he deserved them. "I know I've neglected us," he said. "Things have been complicated with the Foundation's new collaborations." Celeste's gaze sharpened, something steely beneath her calm exterior. "Leonard, I'm not ignorant," she said, her voice even. "I see how you are these days. Always on your phone, texting late at night, coming home at ridiculous hours." A beat of silence. "If there's something I should know," she continued, "just tell me." Leonard's pulse quickened. He could say it now. He could admit he had been playing with fire, that he had let something dangerous with Vanessa Moreau spiral further than it should have, but fear gripped him. Instead, he offered half-truths. "It's just intense negotiations," he said. "Overseas expansions. Nothing you need to worry about." He saw it, the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Fine." She turned to leave. Panic surged through him, and in desperation he reached for her hand. Wait." She hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rawer than before. "Let's go somewhere this weekend. Just the two of us. We can talk properly." Celeste hesitated, considering. "I have a commitment on Saturday," she finally said. "A philanthropic brunch for the hospital." Then, after a pause, "But we can talk Sunday." He nodded quickly. "Yes, Sunday then. We can go to the lake house if you'd like." She sighed, gently pulling her hand away. "We'll see." Then, without another word, she walked off, leaving Leonard standing there, drowning in a suffocating blend of relief and regret. What he didn't know was that the next 24 hours would set events into motion that he could never take back. The next morning, Celeste attended the high-profile philanthropic brunch, a gathering of investors, socialites, and business magnates. Among them was Lawrence Chen, and he made no effort to hide his admiration for her, not just for her charitable work, but for who she was. Something about Lawrence's steady presence, his confidence, his sincerity, resonated with Celeste in a way she hadn't expected. And something inside her responded. It wasn't attraction. Not yet. But it was a shift. The beginning of something neither of them fully understood. That same evening, Leonard met Vanessa at an exclusive private lounge. They had gathered to celebrate yet another funding milestone, another successful collaboration. The air was thick with champagne and quiet triumph, and for a moment, Leonard allowed himself to enjoy the ease of Vanessa's company. Maybe too much. In a moment of carefree indulgence, fueled by alcohol, by the thrill of accomplishment, Vanessa leaned in, wrapping her arms around him in a warm embrace. At that exact moment, from across the room, a camera flashed. Leonard stiffened. Vanessa only laughed, brushing it off as she pulled away. "Relax, darling," she purred. "No one will believe anything's happening. It's just a hug." But Leonard's stomach twisted with dread, because he knew better. He knew exactly how quickly rumors spread. He knew how unforgiving high society could be. And sure enough, by morning, whispers had begun. A single photograph making its rounds through the gossip columns. Montgomery billionaire in warm embrace with stunning philanthropist. The tabloids kept the details vague, but anyone in their social circles could connect the dots. By late afternoon, one of Leonard's colleagues discreetly showed him an online article referencing the scandal. Panic gripped him. He scrambled, immediately contacting his PR team. They assured him they would contain the story, spin it as nothing more than a harmless photo taken out of context. But the damage had already begun. The whispers had started. And soon enough, the news would reach Celeste. If it hadn't already. Leonard's stomach churned with regret. He had been playing with fire. And now, the flames were coming for him. Dread sank deep into Leonard's chest. He had never meant for things to spiral this far, and yet, here he was. The foundation of his marriage, already fragile, riddled with cracks, now stood on the edge of collapse. As he hurried toward his car, his phone vibrated endlessly in his pocket. Calls, messages, warnings, but none of it mattered. Because now, he knew with crushing certainty. He stood to lose the one person who had been there from the very start. Celeste. The scandalous photo spread like wildfire among New York's elite. And then, a single message. A text from a friend. "Have you seen this? Call me if you need anything." At first, Celeste didn't want to look, didn't want confirmation of the betrayal she had feared for months. But something inside her, some quiet, stubborn strength, forced her to open the link. And there it was, splashed across a gossip site. Leonard Whitmore locked in an embrace with Vanessa Moreau. Their faces alight with warmth, their bodies too close. The breath left her lungs. Even though she had sensed his distance for months, seeing the proof, the undeniable, tangible proof, felt like a punch to the gut. Her fingers clenched around her phone, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Part of her wanted to throw the device against the wall, to scream, to rage, to demand answers. But then, a quieter, stronger voice cut through the storm. "Don't let them see you break." That afternoon, Celeste attended a high-profile charity function at the Marriott Marquis. She refused to hide. The event was meant to secure funding for advanced pediatric medical equipment, an initiative she had long championed, and she would see it through. With practiced grace, she greeted donors, exchanged pleasantries, and smiled when necessary. But inside, she was unraveling. And then, across the room, she saw him. Lawrence Chen. He was mid-conversation, but the moment he spotted her, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of recognition, an understanding, a concern that reached beyond polite curiosity. Politely excusing himself from his companions, he made his way to her. "Celeste," he said softly. She forced a weak smile. "Hello, Lawrence." He studied her face, his sharp gaze searching. "I heard some rumors," he admitted. "Are you all right, right?" She swallowed hard, willing herself to hold steady. "I'm fine," she said, too quickly, just focusing on the event. But her eyes betrayed her. Without another word, Lawrence handed her a glass of water. "You need to stay hydrated," he said simply. "These gatherings can be exhausting, even under normal circumstances." Something about the simple gesture, the quiet, genuine thoughtfulness, made her throat tighten. She accepted the glass. "Thank you," she murmured. For a moment, as she met his gaze, the weight of everything threatened to break her. The rest of the event passed in a blur. She delivered her speech about improving pediatric healthcare. The applause rang hollow in her ears. All she could think about was that photograph. Leonard's arms wrapped around Vanessa. By the time the evening concluded, exhaustion weighed heavy in her bones. She couldn't keep pretending. As the last of the guests trickled out, Lawrence lingered. "Celeste," he said quietly, "come with me." She hesitated. "I have a car waiting," he continued. "Let's go somewhere private, somewhere quiet." Under normal circumstances, she would have declined. She would have been careful about appearances. But tonight, she was too weary to care. Without a word, she let him lead her outside. Lawrence's driver took them to a secluded rooftop lounge, a place he frequented. Soft lighting, plush seating, panoramic views of the city stretching endlessly into the night. A waiter brought 2 cups of tea. Lawrence thanked him before turning his full attention to Celeste. "Talk to me," he said gently. She stared into the steam rising from her cup, her voice trembling. "I don't know where to begin." She exhaled shakily, gripping the porcelain between her fingers. "I've spent months trying to salvage my marriage, thinking that if I just gave Leonard space, he'd come back to me." Her voice cracked. She wiped at a tear before it could fall. Lawrence said nothing. He simply waited, giving her the one thing no one else had given her in months, a space to be heard. And for the first time since opening that message, since seeing the truth laid bare, Celeste let herself feel everything. A tear slipped down Celeste's cheek. "I was so naive," she whispered. Lawrence didn't look away. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "You deserve honesty," he said. "Respect. Love. If he's not giving you that, you have every right to demand it or walk away." Celeste sniffled, trying to steady herself. "I never thought I'd be in this position," she admitted. "But after seeing that photo, I can't pretend anymore." Lawrence exhaled, his expression softening with quiet understanding. "Celeste," he murmured, "you're a remarkable woman. Any man would be lucky to have you by his side. Don't ever forget that." Something inside her wavered. She met his eyes, her heart fluttering with an unfamiliar sensation. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been very kind, but I don't know what to do next." A flicker of something passed through Lawrence's gaze. Resolve. Without a word, he reached into the pocket of his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. Celeste's breath caught. Slowly, carefully, Lawrence opened it. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled under the soft rooftop lights, scattering reflections across the night like a shattered rainbow. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Celeste," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We haven't known each other long, but I feel something with you that I've never felt before. I see your grace, your kindness, your integrity." He swallowed hard. "I can't stand by while someone betrays you." Celeste's mind reeled. "Lawrence, please," he said, covering her hand with his. "Hear me out." His grip was warm, steady, nothing like the cold distance she had grown used to. "I want to be the man who gives you the love and respect you deserve," he continued. "Will you marry me?" The world spun. Shock, disbelief. A rush of emotions crashed into her at once. Just hours ago, she had confronted the reality of Leonard's betrayal. And now, on a moonlit rooftop, a powerful CEO was offering her a future, a way out. It felt surreal, like stepping into a dream or a whirlwind of chaos. She drew in a shaky breath. "Lawrence, this is so unexpected, my marriage." "I know," he said gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You're still married, and I know this is happening fast, but I had to speak my truth." He held her gaze, sincerity radiating from every word. "I can't bear to lose you to a man who doesn't see your worth." His voice dropped lower. "I'm willing to wait, if that's what it takes. But I need you to know, my intentions are serious." Tears burned in Celeste's eyes. She turned away, staring out at the endless stretch of city lights below. She thought of Leonard, of all the nights she had waited, hoping he would turn back to her. And then she thought of Lawrence, of his steady presence, his quiet kindness, the way he had seen her when no one else had. For the first time in months, she felt the possibility of escape, of something new. But this wasn't a decision she could make on impulse. She sniffled, exhaling unsteadily. "Lawrence," she said softly, "I can't answer right now. My life is in turmoil. I need time to process everything." He studied her for a long moment. Then, with a quiet nod, he closed the box. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll be here, waiting." Celeste felt the weight of the moment settle over her. She stood at a crossroads. One path led back to Leonard, to a marriage cracked by deception. The other offered a fresh start, but at a pace that left her uncertain of her own heart. She didn't know which way she would go, but whatever she chose, she would do so with her head held high. At that same moment, miles away, Leonard Whitmore stood on the balcony of his estate. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through his phone. A new message, a forwarded image. At first he didn't register it. Then, his stomach dropped. A ring. Lawrence Chen, down on one knee, holding out a diamond ring to Celeste. She stood before him, her expression torn, caught between shock, disbelief, and something Leonard couldn't quite name. His heart pounded, a cold, crushing weight pressed down on his chest. No, a friend's text came through beneath the image. "I thought you should see this." Leonard's grip tightened around his phone. The full weight of his mistakes crashed into him all at once. He had risked everything, his marriage, his home, her, for a fleeting thrill. And now, the woman he had taken for granted was standing before a man who was offering her everything he had failed to give. Love, devotion, respect, a future. Leonard's breath came uneven, his pulse erratic. Was this it? Had he already lost her? Would Celeste accept Lawrence's proposal, walk away from their life together forever? Or would Leonard find a way to fight for redemption before it was too late? The answer hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. And for the first time in his life, Leonard Whitmore felt truly powerless. In the end, the answer wasn't simple. Could love survive betrayal? Could a single moment of regret ever outweigh 1,000 moments of neglect? Celeste Whitmore stood at the edge of two futures, one leading back to the life she had built, fractured but familiar, the other offering something new, uncertain but filled with promise. Leonard Whitmore had taken her for granted, and now, as he faced the possibility of losing her forever, he realized the brutal truth. Regret is a powerless thing when it comes too late. And then there was Lawrence Chen, a man who saw her worth, who offered her the kind of devotion she had once believed impossible. The choice was hers. But whatever she decided, one thing was certain. Celeste would no longer wait in the shadows of someone else's indifference. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of passion, betrayal, and second chances in The Billionaire's Regret. Were you captivated by Celeste's search for self-respect? Moved by Leonard's desperate realization? Intrigued by Lawrence's bold pursuit of love? The story may pause here, but the questions remain. Will Celeste find it in her heart to forgive Leonard? Or will she step forward into a future where she is truly seen? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales filled with twists, heartbreak, and redemption. Your support brings these stories to life. And remember, sometimes the most powerful choice isn't between love and loss. It's choosing yourself.